Hello, good to see you. This is another travel tale, and again, this one's set in North Wales, and it's about memories of mothers. That's what it's called. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Sunday was a bright oasis in a dull early June. By the time we reached Llandudno in North Wales, even the sparse white clouds had given way to unblemished blue. The sea reflected the summer sky and dazzled us. Many varieties of flowers and voluptuous weeds were in full bloom. Paul and I were taking our friend Jean on a pilgrimage to revisit some old haunts where she had holidayed with her mother, who had recently died after a long illness. It was a bittersweet experience for Jean, feeling pain for the suffering of her mother in her last years, but smiling at memories of sharing time with her here. We began at the smaller bay, which is Jean's favourite area, with its spectacular view of the mountains and less crowded beach. She walked to the sea's edge and stood alone, looking at the waves as we got the picnic ready. She cut a poignant figure, for I knew she was shedding tears, both for the love and the loss of her mother. It's a curious but common urge to want to retrace our steps to the places we went together with someone we have loved and lost. Immense sadness combines with flashes of humour and a degree of comfort, and we're driven to do it. To think back to better times is perhaps a first step to diminishing the dreadful images of the last days, months, or even years, watching our loved one approach death, as we try our best to help them and feel the pain of ultimate impotence. Those scars will remain, but can be ameliorated a little by a small personal pilgrimage such as this. Our sympathy for Jean was intensified by the fact that Paul's mother had also died only 2 weeks before this visit. A sad coincidence which allowed us to comfort each other. Jean walked back up the beach, sweeping the tears from her cheeks with the palms of her hands, in keeping with her admirably tenacious and independent spirit, probably thinking we hadn't noticed. After we had eaten our packed lunch on the stone steps by the sand that followed the curve of the beach, a stunningly attractive dog visited our carrier bags and efficiently rifled through the empty wrappings. Finding nothing but the discarded plastic strips from sliced garlic sausage, she quickly dispatched those to her stomach, with what consequences we shall never know. She was like a small, neat husky, and her owner told us she was a Norwegian working dog, strong, given to digging, and unfillable. Her coat was short, silky, and the colour of champagne. Her tail curled above like a question mark. Her eyes were darkly beautiful and intelligent. We were striking up quite a friendship with Freddie, as she was called, until she went off to defend her owner's toddler, who was making sandcastles. The sandcastles were in peril from a madly whirling black mongrel that had raced out of the sea, and Freddie was there in a flash. All this took place near to the sign forbidding dogs on the beach. Jean took us to the hotel she had stayed in with her mother and extolled the virtues of their homemade cream cakes and pavement cafe. She was disappointed to find the establishment down at heel, indifferent to their customers, and devoid of homemade cakes. I struggled to rip open the cellophane on a piece of manufactured fruit cake that had been platelessly chucked on the table by a bored teenage waitress. Jean apologised, but there was no need. The important thing was to be there as part of the grieving process. After a visit to a shoe shop, my friend fortunately stopped me from buying some alarming sandals which made me look like an ancient Roman foot soldier, we strolled to the main promenade by the sea. It was thronging with well-wrapped people despite the sunshine. There was still a cool sea breeze, and after all it takes more than a flash of sun for we British to strip off. We stopped to watch a traditional Punch and Judy show. I like to watch the children's faces as they sit cross-legged on the ground, but they seemed bored and distracted. I wondered how such a show could compete these days with modern media entertainment and its special effects. Punch and Judy would have had far more impact on Victorian children, I suspect. At the end of the pier, we watched the fishermen, with their varying degrees of success, mainly none, and saw hundreds of jellyfish swirling and bobbing with the swell. Our conversation revealed that we did not know how they reproduce or why they have 4 purple circles arranged in their middles, but we didn't like them in such great numbers. We clumped back along the wooden pier and stopped in one of its little huts that sells nothing very much, but we bought some pick and mix sweets. Jean had a rather basic but friendly conversation with the sweet lady, to the effect that she dare not eat too many chocolate-covered raisins due to their wind-producing qualities. The sweet lady retorted that for her part, there was no point in setting off down the length of the pier if she had previously eaten chocolate. We continued towards the old wooden tram, which carries passengers vertically up to the top of the Great Orme Mountain, as we munched sweets reminiscent of our childhoods. Not a good idea, we discovered. People in their 50s are not able to gain as much pleasure from bubble-gum-flavoured, chemically coloured, strawberry licorice sticks stuffed with a nameless white paste that zings on your tongue, as they once might have done. As we sucked on sherbet lemons, sustaining acid burns to the roof of our mouths, we had a very enjoyable retrospective on our favourite book as children. Jean and I found we had the same childhood obsession with The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton. Despite the author's fall from grace, I had liked nothing better than to get a second chance to read it when I had my son, and Jean had used it as a teacher of small children. We recalled the magic lands that visited the top of the tree, and the wonderful sweets known as toffee shocks that expanded in Dick's mouth until they exploded. By coincidence, I was grappling with an enormous lemon zinger, which seemed to possess the same qualities, rendering me speechless and in some distress as we approached the tram and found it closed for the day. We set off up the vertical hill on foot, following the metal tram lines, and turned left to walk through the Hull-free gardens along a coast path which would take us back to the small bay and our car. It was by now early evening, and small birds were trilling in the trees and bushes. We reached a high grassy knoll etched with rocks and threw ourselves down on the grass to enjoy the view of the sea and the mountains. The continual gentle blow of the sea wind against my ears is one of my very favourite sounds. I love high, wild places. They always feel like my natural home, as though a 2,000-year-old ancestry is calling me. Coming down the hillside, we passed many benches with plaques dedicated to people who had loved this place and passed on. A few had small bouquets of faded flowers fastened to them, and one had a rain-smudged, weathered card from someone who still missed their mother. It was strangely appropriate and quite moving. But above all was the connection with nature that felt so right. For the rest of the walk back, we listened to each other's stories of our mothers, for all three of us have lost them in our own different ways. I talked of my own mother, who never made 50 and had been dogged with ill health from 20 years old. I spoke of the difficulty of getting beyond the memories of her illness to remember her well and happy, and of what an unmitigated struggle my mother's life had seemed to be for her. How I loved her simple, stoic attitude and her readiness to enjoy life whenever she could, despite her illness. As soon as I was old enough, I had been her carer through all those years, to the final horrific terminal decline. She was such a beautiful woman, with large, kind blue eyes. No trace of malice in her, ever. If I was worried about doing something, she would say, "Just do your best." And I would immediately feel better. And she loved me to bits. Jean talked of the trials of her mother's severe dementia through the long years of dealing with her mother's distressing condition. She also spoke with great affection of her mother's character and humorous incidents they'd experienced together. Jean single-handedly saw her mother through with reliable and practical love into her late 80s. My husband Paul talked of his mother's so recent death of cancer at 82, surrounded by a large and loving family. She had last been in hospital, before this, in 1948 to have a baby, and had brought up 5 children without even the aid of a washing machine, despite being told as a sickly child that she'd had a weak heart. This was a tough generation. How glad Paul was to have spent so much time just sitting with her in the hospital, being there through the last hours and at the moment that she died. That would have been such a quiet, unspoken comfort to her, to have her son Paul, our rock and anchor, always near her. She believed in us all, totally, but would help us to see the error of our ways when necessary. Her little flat was like a reference library where all information from geography to medicine could be gleaned. The toy cupboard was a source of comfort and pleasure to all visiting grandchildren. She gave unselfish love and support to us all without fear or favour, and she was my second mother. I've learned it can be just as hard to lose someone you love when they are 82 and have had a relatively good life, as to lose someone who was 49 and suffered endlessly. Both of them ripped the heart out of me when they left their bodies. And so today, in this North Wales trip, our sadness is like a bond. All 3 of us have shared our love and appreciation of our mothers on this lovely day in North Wales, which has been bedecked with sunlight, flowers and birdsong. We drove back through the mountains of North Wales, past Betsy Coed, and searched for somewhere to eat. A pub Jean remembered as being excellent had metamorphosed into a gloomy and tatty shadow of its former self, reinforcing the impression that places are rarely as good as you remember them to be. We drove along the motorway until we saw, in the middle of a bleak industrial estate on the border of Wales and England, a great row of golden elephants along a high wall, each with a light on its head. Mirage-like, there appeared to be a large and opulent Indian restaurant, gleaming in an alienating environment of slip roads and deserted factories. It was now 10 p.m, and so we had few options. The restaurant was maddeningly difficult to actually reach, involving several three-point turns in cul-de-sacs with unfinished business units. We finally turned into the huge, largely empty car park, which was also festooned with grand golden sculptures of elephants. In the middle, there was a large fountain with 2 more elephants, but the fountain was toppled over with one of the elephants. The other elephant was still standing, but with one ear broken off. We ventured inside the restaurant to discover an expansive and luxurious establishment and smooth, uniformed waiters given to saying, "Hi, how are we doing here, sir?" The missing ingredient was customers, giving the place an air of the Marie Celeste. Nevertheless, we were shown to a lush waiting lounge for an aperitif and to peruse the exotic and expensive menu. No flock wallpaper. Sophisticated soul and jazz on an excellent sound system played away. Paul ordered a special known as Gandhi's chicken, which prompted me to ask pathetically if the meat would be making a peaceful protest on his plate, and Jean boldly selected a fish masala. I astounded no one by choosing chicken tikka, which I always do. When the food appeared, we could hardly look at it without the aid of sunglasses, for the curry sauces were so brightly coloured with dye, they looked as if they were radioactive. It was somewhat unnerving to eat such a bright red meal that it resembles a can of paint. The alarming colour was matched in intensity by its sweetness, which rendered my pieces of chicken to be reminiscent of the magic faraway tree's toffee shocks, and threatened to have my teeth rotting away to stumps as I chewed. Before leaving the restaurant, Jean and I visited the ladies, to find that the garishness of the curry sauces was rivalled by the wall tiles and gaudy artificial flowering tree. Paul talked to the waiters and found that they were, in reality, all down-to-earth Asian lads from our hometown of Burnley, despite their smooth exteriors. They told us that the fountain had been pushed over by a drunken woman the previous evening. I can only assume she must have been a member of the Welsh women's weightlifting team. Luckily, the Burnley lads were able to direct us back onto the motorway through the deserted industrial maze, and a couple of hours later we were home. Snuggling down in bed, I remembered Abraham Lincoln's famous words about his mother who died when he was 9. He said, "All that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." A mother myself now, I know how unconditional that love is and how pure. And I'm so glad we honoured our own mothers on that day in North Wales. So there you are, another travel tale. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Blessings to you.